using technology to reset the Earth's climate ourselves, controlling our weather. Is this really possible?
Well, they say the government is dumping chemicals on us to control or manipulate the weather.
And they say the unusual-looking jet trails in the sky are actually chemical-laden chemtrails. It's a belief gaining popularity here in Colorado. So, is there really poison in the sky?
Well, no one investigates like News 4. They've happened here and across the country. Mysterious booming noises that, for the most part, have gone unexplained. The booms have shaken homes and startled neighbors. Tonight, News 4's Rachel Kingston is asking what's really going on.
No one seems to know what is causing these weird booms. Not police, not scientists, not even the military. Lakewood Bust-Eye Police offered this official explanation.
The explosion that people heard originated on Lawson Road in the town of Bust-Eye. It's an individual that had put a charge together with a little over 18 pounds of tannerite.
However, since that original boom, there have been sporadic reports of similar booms and shaking in Chautauqua County and beyond that have not been explained.
911, what's your emergency? Yeah, hi. We don't know, actually. There was a really loud boom. It sounded like it come from the back of our house. We just heard it here at the town hall, but we have no idea what it is.
Could you please tell me, did you hear that noise?
Yes, we.
Explosion?
Yes, we did.
I don't see anything. It just like scared them.
Booms. Large trees in front of his house snapped in half. Booms.
Some bizarre noises.
Some strange noises heard around the world the last few weeks. There is now audio proof.
And these people all over the United States are hearing and feeling mysterious loud booms. Investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe began investigating them in 2011. Just since October, Howe has documented booms in 25 different regions across the country.
Geologists say it's not in the ground. The Air Force says it's not in the air. The astronomers say it's not from space. So we're running out of options.
Typically form behind high-flying jets, so that's high altitude, in low humidity. Clouds typically form at low altitude in higher humidity. So the rule is this: clouds and contrails need opposite conditions to form. But today, we have vapor trails, as they call them, condensation trails turning into clouds and spreading out to form a low-altitude white haze. In many parts of the world, we're losing our blue sky. You see New Mexico in the past and New Mexico in the present. The word for this, many people call it whiteout. If you travel in a plane, this is what you're going to see from the window. There's a demarcation line where the white arrow is. I call it the spray line, below which the world is seen through a veil, and above which you have that true deep blue sky. We live in the veil. We live in a white world of whatever it is that's descending on us from above.
Turning normal jet contrails into chemical trails or trails.
Because they're using government planes that are unmarked.
And while some call the concept crazy,
So when they say, no, there's nothing going on, I don't believe that.
Rosalind Peterson says it's anything but.
I think that this is terribly serious in the United States.
The former USDA crop inspector, who was invited to speak at the UN Conference on Climate Change in 2007, has been tracking the government's research on weather modification and something called geoengineering, a way of fighting global warming by putting chemicals like aluminum and barium into the atmosphere to create clouds.
Geoengineering is to make a change which is unnatural.
Now here's something interesting. Daniel Rosenfeld, he's an atmospheric scientist, Hebrew University, Jerusalem. He claims that pollution particulates actually prevent rain by forming very tiny, very stable droplets that remain suspended and do not fall earthward. Now this was headlines. You can Google, pollution stops rain. If this is correct, then it suggests that the smaller the particulate, the more stable the droplet. So this is how you would get clouds to hang in the sky as haze, or so-called clouds. And so it would seem that you could create cloud-like masses simply by releasing small enough particulates into the atmosphere.
She says the suspicious-looking sky shows the government is already experimenting with the weather. And that's why health department records show a sharp increase in barium and aluminum in California's water supply.
Why would we be finding barium and aluminum and other chemicals in our drinking water and have man-made clouds persisting for 20 hours or more?
When you look at airborne environmental samples and the soil and water samples that people have collected throughout the country, you get three types of materials: metallic salts, filaments or fibers, and engineered biologicals. Metallic salts are oxides. Aluminum, titanium, barium are three examples. And it appears now that the air around us has been filled with these metallic oxides, which are conductive particles. So the air is no longer neutral. Air is supposed to be neutral to support life. It is not supposed to be charged.
Years, peculiar cloud formations have been appearing in the skies all over the world with increasing frequency.
It's like something you'd see in a video game on Mario.
Garbia, Tunisia, captured the strange circular formation of clouds.
America have wondered at these flumes crisscrossing the sky in grid patterns, parallel rows, and the now familiar X's. And many of us have wondered what these trails are.
While highly speculative, some researchers suggest these strange cloud formations are another agent of weather warfare. They first appear to be simply contrails, coming from high-flying jet airplanes. But these trails linger in the sky for many hours, some for even an entire day, forming an artificial cloud. Some researchers refer to them as chemtrails. Will Thomas has authored a book about chemtrails. Since the late 1990s, he has worked closely with another journalist in investigating these strange patterns that appear in the sky.
We have an FAA representative, in fact, a high government official, a person we came to call Deep Sky, attesting to the truth and the reality behind chemtrails. He described this program of spraying chemical trails at high altitudes.
The death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, are being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, in England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States but in Mexico and Canada. Birds are dying around the world. Fish are dying by the hundreds of thousands around the world. This is genocide. This is poison. This is murder by the United Nations. This element within our society that's doing this must be stopped.
But Joe Golden from NOAA's headquarters in Boulder says the chemicals in the water are likely caused by man-made pollution.
I have not been able to find any evidence in the scientific literature or elsewhere that anybody, either our government or any private sector or military agency, has been using or spreading chemicals.
He says what we're seeing in the sky are contrails, not some government conspiracy.
Ask the FAA.
So we did ask the FAA.
And those are definitely not, they're definitely not chemicals. It's just heat. It's just a heat reaction to the sub-zero temperature air that's around it.
Still, Golden admits scientists are experimenting with the weather on a smaller scale. Here in Colorado, cloud seeding to create rain or snow is a common practice.
There are things that we believe we can do, but a lot more research needs to be done.
That's why Golden says we will soon see more weather modification programs, including geoengineering, in the near future. But he says it's not happening yet.
The United States began building its own mysterious array of antennas in February 1992. They are located in Gakona, Alaska. The project is called HAARP.
HAARP is the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, originally a joint effort of the Air Force and Navy in cooperation with a number of academic institutions.
HAARP is comprised of 180 antennas, approximately 72 feet tall, linked together to function as one giant steerable antenna.
It uses unique patented ability to focus the energy coming out of the antenna field and injects that energy into a spot at the very top of the atmosphere in a region called the ionosphere.
Steerable because it can aim millions of watts of ELF waves into one tiny patch of the atmosphere,
Injecting their entire output into a spot that's about 12 miles across by about 2.5 miles deep by about 90 miles up.
The U.S. military says HAARP is merely being used to study the physical and electrical properties and behavior of the ionosphere for both civilian and defense purposes.
Singing in here.
The theory is that chemtrails are being used in conjunction with HAARP. By spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from HAARP to heat those metal oxides.
The official HAARP story is told by one man, John Heckscher.
It consists of several types of transmitting instruments and numerous scientific instruments that study the natural ionosphere and the ionosphere that has been perturbed by the instruments that we are building.
The ionosphere is a sea of electrically charged particles in the upper atmosphere, and the instrument is a powerful radio wave transmitter.
Does it have any military applications?
The site itself is strictly a scientific research site. Perhaps the outcome of some of the science perhaps some of the results could be applied in a military systems.
Just a little physics project? Jim Roderick isn't buying it. He's been gunning for the real goods on HAARP.
The military is incapable of doing pure science. Science is conducted by them for application in weapon systems, for no other reason.
Village, Jim and his co-conspirators around the globe have been tapping into databases. They've dredged up hundreds of long-buried scientific reports and even some internal documents from the military.
Plans for HAARP activities correlate with projections of what can be done in the Eastland patents. It's that simple.
So it's not a coincidence?
It's not a coincidence.
Well, I hate to disagree with you, but it's not his patent that we're building. Superficially, yes. They send energy up into the ionosphere.
There is a paper trail leading us back to Eastland.
No, there is not. There is no paper trail that I'm aware of that's leading back to Eastland. Eastland used to be an employee of the company which is building HAARP, but that's pure coincidence.
Is it also a coincidence that the tiny company that owned Eastland's patents was later swallowed up by an enormous military intelligence firm called E-Systems?
$2.1 billion in annual sales, 1.8 billion of that, with a B, was to military intelligence groups, CIA, NSA, and others, and of that, 800 million were black projects, so secret that even the United States Congress didn't know what they were. Why would Raytheon be so excited about this? Well, it's a ground-based Star Wars weapon prototype. For them, it represents potentially billions and billions of dollars.
There's a lot of people around here that have a really lot of strange ideas, and I think many of them are pretty bizarre.
Do you know, do you understand what they're doing here?
Yeah, they're shooting the beams up, and I think that heats a little small space in the ionosphere, and then you've got guys that are sitting on computers, and you've got people putting up weather poles that measure weather and everything like that. There's something spooky going on here.
Loser! You're a loser!
There have been claims made by some scientists that that you could heat up the ionosphere and affect local weather.
If you were to do Eastland patents, I have no doubt that's the case.
Claims are being made that it could disrupt global communications.
Global?
Yes,
No.
that it could shut down another country's communication system and enhance your own.
Not HAARP. Not HAARP in
As it is
Alaska.
now.
No.
But you couldn't disable any systems?
Those that use, if the systems used a path which was accessible to the HAARP beam, yes.
Starting to sound like Eastland's invention to you?
HAARP is being used for weather modification. The military's own record proves it. They've admitted it within their own documents, and yet they still deny it to the public.
Dr. Brooks Agnew has researched ELF wave technology for the past 30 years and is convinced HAARP's effect on the ionosphere does alter the weather. HAARP is one of several ELF wave transmitters located all over the globe. The United States owns and operates 3 of them, one in Gacona, Alaska, another in Fairbanks, Alaska, and one in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Russia has one in Vasilursky near Nizhny Novgorod, and the European Union has one near Tromsø in Norway. Working in tandem, these transmitters could potentially alter the weather anywhere in the world, triggering massive rainstorms or droughts, Even hurricane steering would be possible by heating up the atmosphere and building up high-pressure domes that could deflect or change the course of hurricanes. Is it more than coincidence that since going online, some experts have reported strange weather anomalies, including massive floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes? There are reportedly a total of 5 known ionospheric heaters, including HAARP, in the world today. There are possibly 20 other ionospheric heaters in existence all over the world. There is no conclusive proof that any of them are being used as weather weapons, though they do have the ability to manipulate the ionosphere.
Cloud, this is really cool stuff. There you go, we're back to 5:15. Watch the bottom of the cloud coming up. Look at that. Is that incredible? Alpha Sky Vision caught that just a little while back.
I want to be either an artist or a teacher. I want to grow up in a world where there's lots of nature. I love nature.
Geoengineering is defined as the artificial modification of the Earth's climate. Geoengineers are proposing spraying 10 to 20 million tons of toxic aluminum and other substances into our sky for the stated goal of cooling our planet.
How can I look my children in the eyes and not try to shed the light on this issue, knowing every breath they take is laden with these metals? I have been forced to conclude that there is no greater or no more immediate threat to anything that lives and breathes than the global geoengineering programs, short of nuclear catastrophe.
For now, we're told that this is a future consideration, but for years, we've already been seeing strange clouds and hazy skies. What exactly is dripping here? This is a photo I took, and here you have this new form, they tell us, new form of cloud, a hooked cloud called cirrus uncinus. And here you have asperatus. This is another picture I took. I had never seen this kind of cloud before. I'd only seen photos of it, and then it suddenly appeared. Today, what appear to be jet contrails are much more frequent and last for 10 to 20 hours. And here's what they look like over these beautiful mountains and lakes. Counting all trails in every direction over Mount Shasta, Mangel says, the FAA indicates there can't be that many flights per day. The number has been as high as over 30 contrails at once, and I've counted 100 just before weather front.
Wherever you see the jet chemtrails go over, you're going to get aluminum, barium, strontium coming down on you.
Lab tests from Northern California show very high levels of aluminum and barium in soil and pond water. Francis Mangels told me that at 100 micrograms per liter, when he was working for the federal government, you were shut down, 1,000 micrograms per liter. So here you have the findings from pond water in Mount Shasta. You can see 12,000 micrograms per liter. UG is short for microgram, which is 24,000 times normal.
Why would we not believe this is happening when we have escalating levels in very short time frames, as short as 5 years? We see rain levels of aluminum, for example, escalating as much as 50,000%. California air quality studies do not show these metals migrating from China, and it's of recent origin, so this bombardment of heavy metals that's raining down on us is coming from somewhere.
And here you have a lined pond. So please picture a lined pond. A pond with a liner, vinyl something, in Bella Vista. And you got a reading, 375,000 micrograms per liter in this little pond.
So let me distinguish these two different kinds of geoengineering as clearly as I can. So the first one is we call solar radiation management, and that's the idea that you could put mostly reflective particles or other means to make the Earth whiter, effectively to increase the Earth's reflectivity, reducing the amount of heat that's absorbed by the sun.
I think, though the initial results of climate models indicate that reflection of sunlight away from the Earth can offset most climate change in most places most of the time, but it will damage some places. damage some places.
Mangels has, I will repeat, a master's of science in water-related subjects. And he also reports the soil tested outside this house in Northern California, 3,000 micrograms of aluminum, more than the soil under the house. So what does this mean? It means that something is dropping from above and is affecting the soil around the house, but not underneath it. So you can't say that this is in the groundwater. You can't say this is in the earth itself, coming from the earth. It's got to be coming from the environment.
Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about alumina. It turns out, first of all, there's been a lot of work on the environmental consequences of alumina in the stratosphere. There's a bunch of papers going back to the 70s that look at the radiative and ozone-destroying properties of alumina in the stratosphere, and those make you think it might be useful. Do this in just a jet in a very simple way. Make high-quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly, in principle, possible to do that.
Since we released What in the World Are They Spraying?, hundreds of people from around the world have began taking rain tests. What they're finding is what many are calling the chemtrail geoengineering footprint of aluminum, barium, and strontium.
This is devastating to plants, totally devastating. The trees are dying. Why? Approximately 2 years ago, I rode in the back, and you can ride in the back of my place for miles. You can go all the way through the woods, you know, creeks and everything, and it was, I say was, gorgeous. And the day before yesterday, I took a ride, and I rode in the back, and what I found was total devastation.
As I pointed out before, Michael, we're seeing, as in this example here, very hardy native plants completely flash out dead. That looks like it's been hit with some kind of a chemical. And we've only seen this in the last couple of years, and there's another one there, back over there. We're seeing mature madrone trees, which are 70, 80 feet high, flash out dead, just like this. USDA refuses to investigate it.
The bees, what about the bees? Is it farm chemicals? If it's farm chemicals, why are the bees just as dead 1,000 miles into the wilderness? The bee collapse disorder appears to be most directly related to geoengineering and the radio frequency signals. One more article, A World Without Bees. Einstein said, 4 years after the bees disappear, so will humans. This is a great example of a nucleated snowstorm. I don't know how many of you heard of this. 100,000 cattle feared dead after early South Dakota snowstorm. October 4th, last year, up to 100,000 cattle died. This is an important map because this is the map for the snowstorm I just described in South Dakota that killed 100,000 cattle. Take a good look at that map. How can 100,000 cattle die in South Dakota when you have temperatures of Chicago, 85 degrees? You had, this is from the same time, you had 89 in Kansas City. How can you possibly have an event like that? How is that possible? And it shows snow right there at 44 degrees, snow at 36 degrees. They don't put these maps out now because it's pretty damn obvious.
As nature begins to die, we will be told that science will have to step in to save it. So, you'll have GMO trees as the answer. The silent forest, they call it, genetically engineered trees, non-reproductive, no fruit, nuts, blossoms, no insects, animals, birds. Low lignin, that's the wood fiber, which makes the tree very easy to cut and pulp. The silent forest will grow straight and tall and will be replenished by the state in what will be considered appropriate numbers and in appropriate locations. In May 2010, from this article, we learned that the USDA approved large-scale field trials of 200,000 GMO eucalyptus trees made by ArborGen, biotech company, to be planted from Florida to Texas.
Unbelief, if people look up the term global dimming, they will see that fully 20% of the sun's rays that reached the planet several decades ago are no longer reaching the planet. I mean, that's a profound change that few people even know is occurring. And you have very visible occurrences in the sky from the aircraft, a very visible sun-blocking, expanding, dingy trails that are exactly what geoengineering patents describe.
Heavy aluminum, I'm talking like in the 40s and 50s up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, that's still common.
Where is this mountain of metal coming from? Why is asthma, ADD, Alzheimer's, autism, all elements related in many studies to aluminum or particulate inhalation? Why are these ailments going off the charts?
While geoengineers claim that their models are to cool the planet, A number of studies now are arising that indicate, yes, temporarily there will be regionally cooling as these particulates reflect the sun. However, they actually at night act as a blanket and will warm the planet.
Historically, weather modification in the United States began to be looked upon in the 1940s as something that people would want to do. And so they started looking at making it enhancing snow, enhancing rain. They started looking at hurricane control. There was a whole bunch of projects in the 40s that started. One was Project Storm Fury, which turned into a disaster when they tried to modify a hurricane.
I'm Mark McCandlish. And for the better part of 30 years, I worked in the aerospace and defense industry. Had a secret clearance twice during my career. Some of the technology that I saw or participated in the creation of tends to play a role in some of the things that are used to control the weather. The very distribution process is being employed in the aerosol campaign, manipulating the weather, crops, taking over the food production or controlling the food production. The military applications, the process evolved when they realized in the 1800s that you can put things into the environment that will influence the uptake of moisture and where it drops out of the atmosphere again.
I was a television weatherman for 20 years. These chemtrails are absolutely required to impact whatever weather event they were designing. When the geoengineering really got underway with the Russians in the mid-70s, we ended up with snow in Miami. We ended up with frost deep into Mexico.
There's very profound things that people don't notice. Blue skies almost never. We almost never have dew on the ground. In the continental U.S., there were 15,232 temperature records broken. That's profound. Some of the daytime highs, the former records were broken by as much as 32 degrees. There's a patent called ice nucleation for weather modification. This is a patent from NASA. It can be found online in its full form. This patent is for the creation of artificial snowstorms from what would have been rainstorms. However preposterous this sounds to people, if they look up Chinese create snowstorms, they will find a long list of articles where the Chinese Bureau of Weather Modification openly admitted that they were creating snowstorms until they did $1 billion worth of damage in Beijing.
With cloud seeding, the cooling will be achieved by making clouds reflect a bit more sunlight back to space than they would otherwise, and less sunlight reaching the surface would tend to cool the planet.
Well, the one thing that we know has happened is because these are nanoparticles and they float like mad with a little bit of moisture added to them, they go over the Continental Divide and they dump all of California's rain into the Mississippi Valley, which is the reason they're having floods and tornadoes and fierce storms and odd weather back east. The effect here in California is drought.
Now then, if you hit that area of the sky with a beam of a particular kind of radiation, and you can heat those particles up, just like heating up your cup of coffee in the microwave, these particles begin to vibrate and resonate if you use the right frequency of RF energy, that they then heat the surrounding air, and they will take all of that air and the moisture that's in it to a higher altitude where it's much colder, and it'll condense and then become a low pressure system.
And then they're running the flights back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and literally seeding the leading edges of the cirrus. So the cirrus canopy is accentuated.
But you can also influence what happens locally with the atmosphere by painting the materials that these aerosols are made of with different kinds of radio frequency or RF energy, radar, microwave, the HAARP system.
This is clearly just a depiction, but I want to drive the point home. That's exactly where we're headed. We're headed there fast. If we don't have an atmosphere that'll support life, the atmosphere is as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball. It's the only thing that sustains our lives. To have this sort of experimentation going on above our heads every day, and that very, very thin, fragile layer. It is the only thing that protects us in an incredibly hostile environment.
I can't stop.